Last August I spent in Cadenabia, one of those little places on the shore of Lake Como that lie so quietly hidden among white villas and dark trees. Even in the noisiest spring days, when crowds of tourists from Bellagio and Menaggio flood the narrow strip of shoreline, the town remained steeped in peace, and now, in the August heat, it was nothing but silence itself, sunlit and fragrant. The hotel was almost empty, its few residents regarded one another with puzzled looks, unable to understand how anyone could choose this forgotten corner for a summer holiday, and each morning, meeting at the breakfast table, they expressed fresh surprise that no one had yet departed. I was especially intrigued by one elderly gentleman, strikingly distinguished and elegant, something between an English lord and a Parisian dandy. He took no interest in water sports and spent his days in the same spot, following with thoughtful eyes the thin stream of smoke from his cigarette, or idly turning the pages of a book. 2 unbearably dull, rainy days, together with the man's evident cordiality, soon gave our acquaintance a shade of warmth that was hardly diminished by the difference in our ages. A Livonian by birth, raised first in France and later in England, a man who had never held any fixed occupation nor, for many years now, any fixed abode, he was, in the highest sense, without a homeland, as all the knights and pirates of beauty are without one. Those who drift from city to city across the world, greedily absorbing whatever beauty crosses their path. He was, in a dilettante's way, knowledgeable in all the arts, yet his aristocratic unwillingness to serve art was stronger than his love for it. He had taken from it 1,000 happy hours, without giving it in return a single second of creative fire. The lives of such people may seem pointless, for no ties bind them to society, and all the treasures they have amassed, made up of 1,000 unique and precious impressions unbequeathed to anyone, vanish into nothing with their last breath. One evening, as we sat before the hotel watching the pale lake slowly darken, I brought up the subject. He smiled. "Perhaps you're not entirely wrong. And yet, I do not value memories. What is lived is over in the very moment it leaves us. Poetry? Why, does it not die as well in 20, 50, 100 years? But tonight I will tell you something. To my mind, it would make a rather good plot for a short story. Let's take a walk. Such things are better spoken of on the move." We set out along a lovely path that wound beside the shore. Ancient cypresses and broad-branched chestnut trees shaded it, while, in the openings between their boughs, the lake flashed restlessly. In the distance, white as a cloud, Bellagio gleamed, softly tinted by the elusive colors of the sun already gone, and high, far above the dark hill, the roof of the Villa Serbelloni sparkled like a diamond in the last rays of sunset. The faintly sultry warmth did not oppress us. Like a gentle woman's hand, it clasped the shadow tenderly, filling the air with the scent of invisible flowers. My companion broke the silence. "I must begin with a confession. Until now I have not told you that I was here last year, here in Cadenabia, at this very time of year, in this very hotel. My admission will probably surprise you, especially after I told you that all my life I have avoided any kind of repetition. So, listen. Last year it was, of course, just as empty as it is now. The same gentleman from Milan spent whole days fishing, and in the evening tossed his catch back into the water, only to catch it again in the morning. Then 2 elderly English ladies, whose quiet, plant-like existence passed unnoticed. Then a handsome young man with a very charming pale girl. I still cannot believe they were husband and wife, so deeply did they love each other. And finally, a German family, clearly from the north of Germany. An elderly, broad-boned woman with straw-colored hair, ungainly, coarse movements, steely eyes like needles, and a narrow, knife-slit of a cruel mouth. With her was her sister, yes, undoubtedly her sister, with the same features, but blurred, softened, puffier. They spent the whole day together, yet never spoke to one another. bending silently over their needlework, weaving into its patterns all their vacant-mindedness, relentless parsi in the stifling world of boredom and narrowness. And with them there was a young girl of about 16, the daughter of one or the other, I never knew which. The angular incompleteness of her face and figure was already giving way to feminine roundness. She was, in truth, not beautiful, too thin, too unformed, and, of course, dressed without taste, but in her one could sense some touching, helpless yearning. Her large eyes, dark with fire, shrank timidly from a stranger's gaze and flickered with tiny glints. She, too, carried her needlework everywhere, but her hands often lingered, her fingers fell still above the cloth, and she would sit perfectly quiet, gazing at the lake with a dreamy, motionless look. I do not know why this so gripped my heart. Perhaps it was simply the inevitable, banal thought that always comes to mind when one sees a faded mother beside a blossoming daughter, man and his shadow, that in every young face wrinkles are already hidden, in every smile lies weariness, in every dream its future disillusion. Or perhaps I was drawn by that unknowing, restless, overflowing longing, that unique, miraculous season in a girl's life when her gaze devours everything, for there is not yet that one thing to which she will cling, as seaweed clings to a drifting log. I could watch endlessly her dreamy, solemn eyes, the impetuous tenderness with which she caressed any living creature, be it cat or dog, the restlessness that made her start several things at once and finish none, the feverish haste with which she would, in the evenings, devour the paltry little books from the hotel library or leaf through the 2 battered volumes of poetry she had brought with her, Gertie and Bomback. "Why are you smiling?" I apologized and explained. You see, it amused me, the juxtaposition of Gertie and Bomback. Ah, that. Yes, it is rather funny. And yet, in another sense, not at all. Believe me, at that age young girls care nothing for what poems they read, good or bad, sincere or false. Poems are but vessels. What wine they hold matters little, for the intoxication is already within them before they have taken the first sip. And so this girl was filled with a vague melancholy. You could see it in the gleam of her eyes, in the trembling of her hands, in her walk, at once shy and constrained, yet as if winged. It was plain she longed desperately to speak to someone, to share the overfullness of her heart, but there was no one, only loneliness, and the ceaseless clatter of knitting needles to left and right, and the cold, dispassionate eyes of the 2 women. An endless pity came over me. And yet I did not dare to approach her. First of all, what is an old man like me to a young girl at such a moment? And then my incurable horror of all family acquaintances, especially with elderly Philistine ladies, excluded any possibility of closer contact. And then a rather odd thought occurred to me, this young, unworldly, untried girl, here for the first time in Italy, which, thanks to an Englishman named Shakespeare, who himself never set foot here, Germans imagine to be the native land of romantic love, the country of Romeo, of secret adventures, dropped fans, flashing daggers, masks, duennas, and tender letters. She was surely dreaming of love, and who can fathom a girl's dreams, those white, airy clouds that drift aimlessly through the blue, and, like all clouds, take on warmer colors toward evening, first turning rosy, then flaring into bright crimson? Nothing would seem to her implausible or impossible. And so I resolved to invent for her a mysterious lover. That same evening, I wrote her a long letter, filled with the most humble and reverent tenderness, vague hints, and, without a signature. A letter that demanded nothing and promised nothing, ardent, yet restrained. In short, a true love letter out of a romantic poem. Knowing that, driven by some obscure restlessness, she was always the first to appear at breakfast, I slipped the letter into her napkin. Morning came. From the garden, I watched her. I saw her mistrustful astonishment, her sudden fright. I saw the bright flush flood her pale cheeks and neck, saw her glance helplessly about, then hastily, furtively hide the letter, sitting there confused, hardly touching her food. Then she sprang up from the table and hurried away, somewhere into a shady, deserted alley, to read the mysterious message. "You wanted to say something?" Evidently I had made some involuntary movement, which I now had to explain. "Wasn't that rather risky? Didn't it occur to you she might try to find out, or simply ask the waiter how the letter got into her napkin? Or perhaps even show it to her mother?" "Why, of course I thought of that. But had you seen this girl, this timid, sweet creature, had you seen the fear with which she glanced around whenever she happened to speak a little louder, you would have cast all doubts aside. There are girls whose modesty is so great that one can do with them whatever one pleases, for they are utterly helpless and would endure anything rather than confide in anyone. I watched her with a smile, delighted that my game had succeeded. But then she returned, and the blood began to pound in my temples. It was another girl now, another step. She walked in agitation, excitement, a hot blush flooding her face, her charming confusion slowing her pace. And so it went all day. Her eyes turned toward every window, as though the solution awaited her there. They followed every passerby, and once they fell on me. But I avoided them, afraid of betraying myself with even the flicker of an eyelid. And yet, in that briefest instant, I felt such a burning question in them that I was almost alarmed, and once more, as many years ago, I understood that there is no temptation more powerful, more ruinous, and more alluring than to kindle the first fire in a girl's eyes. Later I saw her sitting between her mother and aunt, saw her languid fingers, saw how now and again she pressed her hand convulsively to her breast, no doubt, where the letter was hidden. The game had me in its grip. That evening I wrote her a second letter, and so it went on, day after day. I found a peculiar pleasure in describing in my messages the feelings of a young man in love, in portraying the mounting of an imagined passion. It became, for me, an absorbing sport, much, I suppose, like what hunters feel when they set snares or lure their prey within range. My success exceeded all expectations, even frightened me. I was already thinking of ending the game, but the temptation was too great. Her step grew light, impetuous, almost dancing. Her face took on a trembling, unrepeatable beauty. Even her sleep, I think, became nothing but restless anticipation of the next letter, for in the morning's black shadows lay beneath her anxious, burning eyes. She even began to care for her appearance, pinning flowers in her hair. A boundless tenderness toward all the world emanated from her hands. An eternal question shone in her eyes. From 1,000 small details scattered through my letters she guessed that their author was somewhere nearby, an invisible Ariel who filled the air with music, hovered at her side, knew her most secret dreams, yet would not reveal himself. She became so animated in those last days that even her dull-witted companions could not fail to notice the transformation. More than once they exchanged covert glances and kindly smiles as they looked at her lively figure and blooming cheeks. Her voice had gained resonance. It grew louder, higher, bolder. Something in her throat trembled, as if a song longed to break free in a jubilant trill, as if, "I see you're smiling again. No, no, please go on. I was only thinking what a fine storyteller you are. Forgive me, but you really do have a gift. You could set it down no worse than any of our writers. You mean, of course, to hint gently and tactfully that I tell a story like your German novelists, pompously, sentimentally, at tedious length, and rather boringly. You are right. I shall try to be briefer." The marionette danced, and I pulled the strings with a confident hand. To divert from myself the slightest suspicion, for at times I felt her eyes linger on me with a probing look, I let her understand that the author of the letters did not live here, but in one of the neighboring resorts, and came here each day by boat or steamer. After that, whenever the bell announced the arrival of a steamer, she would, under any pretext, slip away from her mother's watchfulness, hide herself in some corner of the pier, and, holding her breath, scan the passengers. And then, one day, it was a grey, overcast morning, and I, with nothing else to do, was watching her. Something unexpected happened. Among the other passengers stepping ashore was a handsome young man, dressed with that striking elegance peculiar to young Italians. He glanced about, and his eyes met the desperate, summoning gaze of the girl. At once, her timid smile was swept away by a bright flood of shame. The young man paused, looked at her more closely, which is hardly surprising when one is greeted with such a passionate glance, full of 1,000 unspoken confessions, and, smiling, made his way toward her. Now certain he was the one she had so long awaited, she turned and fled, then slowed, then broke again into a run, glancing back at him again and again, that eternal duel between desire and fear, passion and modesty, a duel in which the weaker heart always triumphs over the stronger will. He, clearly emboldened, though not without surprise, quickened his pace after her, nearly overtaking her, and I already feared that everything would collapse into wild chaos, when suddenly her mother and aunt appeared on the road ahead. She darted to them like a startled bird. The young man prudently fell back, but she turned, and they exchanged one last, calling look. This incident very nearly made me end the game, but I could not resist the temptation, and decided to take advantage of so timely an opportunity. That evening I wrote her an especially long letter, one that would confirm her guess. The thought of introducing a second marionette into the play amused me. The next morning I was startled. Every feature of hers showed the strongest agitation. The happy excitement had given way to a nervousness I could not understand. Her eyes were red from tears. Some hidden pain was tormenting her. Even her silence seemed like a stifled cry. A sorrowful furrow darkened her brow, and in her gaze, where today I had expected to see a quiet, clear joy, there was a bleak, bitter despair. I grew afraid. For the first time, something unforeseen had entered my game. The marionette refused to obey, and danced quite differently from how I had meant her to. The game began to frighten me. I even decided to stay away the whole day, so as not to meet the reproach in her eyes. When I returned to the hotel, I understood it all. Their table was not laid, they had gone. She had been forced to leave without saying a word to him. She could not bring herself to confide in her family, to beg for just one more day, one more hour. She had been torn from her sweet dreams and carried off to some dreary provincial backwater. That had never crossed my mind. Even now, that last look of hers pierces me with its heavy accusation, that explosion of anger, torment, despair, and the bitterest pain with which I had, perhaps for long, shaken her life. He fell silent. Night was following us, and the moon, half veiled by clouds, poured a strange, shimmering light upon the earth. It seemed as though the stars, the far-off glimmers, and the pale surface of the lake hung suspended among the trees. We walked on in silence. At last my companion spoke again. "That's all." "Well, why not a short story? I don't quite know what to say. In any case, it's an interesting tale. I'll keep it in mind along with many others. I'm very grateful to you for telling it. But to call it a short story? It's more of an excellent prologue, one that might even prompt me to carry it further. You see, these people, you've barely allowed them to touch. Their characters haven't yet taken shape. These are the premises of human destinies, but not the destinies themselves. It ought to be finished. I see what you mean. The girl's later life, her return to the provincial backwater, the deep tragedy of a humdrum existence. No, not even that. The heroine no longer interests me. Girls of that age are of little real interest, however significant they may appear to themselves. All their emotions are contrived, and therefore monotonous. In due time, she'll marry some respectable bourgeois, and this incident will remain the brightest page in her memories. No, she doesn't interest me. How strange. I can't understand, then, what could have interested you in the young man? Such fleeting, passionate glances fall to the lot of everyone in youth. Most don't even notice them, others forget them quickly. One has to grow old to realize that perhaps this is the purest, the most beautiful thing life gives, that it is the sacred privilege of youth. It isn't the young man that interests me. Then who? I would change the author of the letters, the elderly gentleman. I'd finish drawing that figure. I think that at no age can one write passionate letters and immerse oneself in imagined love without consequence. I'd try to show how the game becomes reality, how he thinks he directs the game, while in truth it has long been directing him. The blossoming beauty of the girl, which he believes he observes from a distance, in fact moves and captivates him deeply. And in that moment, when everything slips from his hands, he is seized by an aching longing for the interrupted game and for the plaything. What would fascinate me in this feeling is what makes the passion of an older man so like that of a boy, for both feel themselves unworthy of love. I would have the old man pine and grow shy, I'd make him lose all peace of mind, follow her to see her again only, at the last moment, to lack the courage to show himself. I'd have him return the next year to the same place, hoping to meet her, to beg a happy chance from fate. But fate, of course, would prove implacable. That is how I imagine the story. And it would come out. Contrived, false, impossible. I started at the suddenness of it. His voice cut me off, harsh, hoarse, almost like a threat. Never before had I seen my companion in such agitation. And then it struck me, I realized what wound I had unwittingly touched. He stopped abruptly, and I saw, with a pang, how his grey hair gleamed silver in the dim light. I wanted at once to change the subject, but he had already begun to speak again, warmly and gently now, in that calm, even voice of his, tinged with a quiet sadness. Perhaps you're right. It would, I suppose, be far more interesting. Elamore Couch Cher Auxiliary Vieillards, Love is Costly for Old Men, so Balzac, I believe, titled some of the most touching pages of one of his novels. And that title could serve many other tales as well. But old men, who know better than anyone how true it is, prefer to speak of their triumphs, not of their weaknesses. They do not wish to appear ridiculous, yet it is nothing more than the eternal pendulum swing of fate. Do you truly believe that the very chapters of Casanova's memoirs which happened to be lost were those describing his old age, when the seducer became the cuckold, the deceiver the deceived? Perhaps he simply lacked the courage to write them. He offered me his hand. His voice had regained its even, calm, impassive tone. Good night. I see it is dangerous to tell such stories to young men, especially on summer nights. They plant in them foolish notions and empty dreams. Good night. He turned and walked away into the darkness with that springy stride of his, though the years had already set their mark upon it. It was late. Yet the drowsiness that usually came early in the soft, heavy night air did not visit me now, held off by that peculiar quickening of the blood which comes when one encounters something out of the ordinary, or when, for an instant, one lives through another's feelings as though they were one's own. I followed the quiet, dark road to Villa Carlotta. Its marble staircase descends straight to the water, and sat down on the cold steps. The night was exquisite. The lights of Bellagio, which earlier had twinkled between the trees like fireflies, now seemed infinitely distant, and one by one they slowly fell into the deepening darkness. The lake lay silent, glittering like a black diamond set in a circlet of shore lights. The waves lapped against the steps with a soft murmur like white hands running lightly over pale keys. The pale expanse of sky, strewn with thousands of stars, seemed bottomless. They shone in solemn silence, and now and then one would dart away from the sparkling host, plunging into the summer night, into the darkness, into valleys and ravines, into far-off deep waters, plunging, not knowing whither, like a human life flung by a blind force into the unfathomable depths of unknown fate.